grass of the previous summer's growth lay matted like a carpet. Our saddle horses by this time were fairly well broken to camp life, and with the cattle on hand, night herding them had to be abandoned. Billy Honeyman, however, had noticed several horses that were inclined to stray on day herd, and these few leaders were so well marked in his memory that, as a matter of precaution, he insisted on putting a rope hobble on them. At every noon and night camp we strung a rope from the hind wheel of our wagon and another from the front end of the wagon tongue back to stakes driven in the ground or held by a man, forming a triangular corral. Thus, in a few minutes, under any conditions, we could construct a temporary corral for catching a change of mounts, or for the wrangler to hobble untrustworthy horses. On the trail all horses are free at night, except the regular night ones, which are used constantly during the entire trip, and under ordinary conditions kept strong and improve in flesh. Before the herd was brought in for the night, and during the supper hour, Flood announced the guards for the trip. As the men usually bunked in pairs, the foreman chose them as they slept, but was under the necessity of splitting two berths of bedfellows. Rod Wheat, Joe Stallings, and Ash Brownstone were assigned to the first guard from 8 to 10:30 p.m. Bob Blades, Bull Durham, and Fox Quarternight were given second guard from 10:30 to 1. Paul Priest, John Officer, and myself made up the third watch from 1 to 3:30. The Rebel and I were bunkies, and this choice of guards, while not ideal, was much better than splitting bedfellows and having them annoy each other by going out and returning from guard separately. The only fault I ever found with Priest was that he could use the poorest judgment in selecting a bed ground for our blankets, and always talked and told stories to me until I fell asleep. He was a light sleeper himself, while I, being much younger, was the reverse. The fourth and last guard, from 3:30 until relieved after daybreak, fell to Wyatt Roundtree, Quince Forrest, and Moss Strayhorn. Thus the only men in the outfit not on night duty were Honeyman, our horse wrangler, Barney McCann, our cook, and Flood, the foreman. The latter, however, made up by riding almost double as much as any man in the outfit. He never left the herd until it was bedded down for the night, and we could always hear him quietly arousing the cook and the horse wrangler an hour before daybreak. He always kept the horse on picket for the night, and often took the herd as it left the bed ground at clear dawn. A half hour before dark, Flood and all the herdmen turned out to bed down the cattle for our first night. They had been well grazed after counting, and as they came up to the bed ground, there was not a hungry or thirsty animal in the lot. All seemed anxious to lie down, and by circling around slowly while gradually closing in the course of a half an hour, all were bedded nicely on possibly 5 or 6 acres. I remember there were a number of muleys among the cattle, and these would not venture into the compact herd until the others had lain down. Being hornless, instinct taught them to be on the defensive, and it was noticeable that they were the first to arise in the morning in advance of their horned kin. When all had laid down, Flood and the first guard remained, the others returning to the wagon. The guards ride in a circle about 4 rods outside the sleeping cattle, and by riding in opposite directions make it impossible for any animal to make its escape without being noticed by the riders. The guards usually sing or whistle continuously, so that the sleeping herd may know that a friend and not an enemy is keeping vigil over their dreams. A sleeping herd of cattle makes a pretty picture on a clear moonlit night, chewing their cuds and grunting and blowing over contented stomachs. The night horses soon learn their duty, and a rider may fall asleep or doze along in the saddle, but the horses will maintain their distance in their leisurely sentinel rounds. On returning to the wagon, Priest and I picketed our horses, saddled where we could easily find them in the darkness, and unrolled our beds. We had 2 pair of blankets each, which, with an ordinary wagon sheet doubled for a tarpaulin, and coats and boots for pillows, completed our couch. We slept otherwise in our clothing worn during the day, and if smooth sandy ground was available on which to spread our bed, We had no trouble in sleeping the sleep that long hours in the saddle were certain to bring. With all his pardonable faults, The Rebel was a good bunkie and a hale companion, this being his sixth trip over the trail. He had been with Lovell over a year before the two made the discovery that they had been on opposite sides during the late unpleasantness. On making this discovery, Lovell at once rechristened Priest the Rebel, and that name he always bore. He was 15 years my senior at this time, a wonderfully complex nature, hardened by unusual experiences into a character the gamut of whose moods ran from that of a good-natured fellow to a man of unrelenting severity and anger. We were sleeping a 9-knot gale when Fox Quarternight of the 2nd Guard called us on our watch. It was a clear, starry night, and our guard soon passed, the cattle sleeping like tired soldiers. When the last relief came on guard and we had returned to our blankets, I remember Priest telling me this little incident as I fell asleep. I was at a dance once in Live Oak County, and there was a stuttering fellow there by the name of Lem Todhunter. The girls, it seemed, didn't care to dance with him and pretended they couldn't understand him. He had asked every girl at the party and received the same answer from each. They couldn't understand him. Well, go to hell then. Can you understand that? He said to the last girl, and her brother threatened to mangle him horribly if he didn't apologize, to which he finally agreed. He went back into the house and said to the girl, "You need to go to hell. Your brother and I have made other arrangements." End of chapter 2.